Something's missing from Sheffield this year. And I don't just mean big names who won't be there for the first time. I'm talking about a very distinct winning tradition that is set to be broken for the first time since Sheffield's inception. It is the trend of the hero cuts. These are the champions from each of the previous Sheffields, and in each year, one of the champions has been a lifter who has cut down to the weight class below to do a quote-unquote hero cut and winning in a weight class that they would not have competed in normally up until that point. Evie Corrigan, Agata Sitko, and Kjell Bakkelund, and this year for the first time, we're not going to be seeing any lifters dropping down a weight class. Take a look at why that is, but first, the history of this hero cut, and Evie Corrigan was the pioneer here. 2023, the inaugural Sheffield, coming in, her PB total was 476 in the 57 kilo class, where she had finished in 4th place at Worlds 2022, so she actually finished off podium at the Worlds prior, and I believe she got a wildcard spot, a wildcard invite to Sheffield. The 52 kilo world record at the time was 438, held by Noemi Alabert, who won Worlds in 2022, and actually ended up finishing in silver medal position at Sheffield behind Evie, who ended up winning, with a 460 kilo total, over 1,000 pounds, breaking the world record. 105.02% is what her final score was, taking out the inaugural Sheffield trophy for the women, and being the first one to sort of pioneer this trend of lifters looking to attack some of the potentially weaker or less developed world records by dropping down and cutting down a weight class. Then 2024, Agata Sitko followed her lead. Now it's hard to imagine, but when 2024 started, Agata was not the dominant Polish Terminator that she has since become. She was coming with a PB total of 590.5 in the 76 kilo class, where she had taken 2 silver medals in a row at Worlds behind Jess Bittner in 2022 and Kalina Tongatea in 2023. That was actually the last time Agata has ever been beaten against Kalina that year. But 590.5 as a 76, and she had previously competed even in the 84 kilo class. So she was a 76 and an 84 kilo lifter, but she decided to cut down to the 69s for Sheffield in 2024 because the world record there was 549, which at the time was held by Leah Bavois, who was the world champion from 2023. And yeah, this was actually a bit of a lower world record because the 63 world record was actually higher. Bit of a unique situation because the 69s were a weight class that was only introduced a few years prior, hence the lower world record. But you can see she had quite a bit of gap there, above 40 kilos over the world record. She dropped down, and she not only preserved her strength, she actually improved it, and she took the 69s from the 540s all the way up to 600 to win Sheffield in 2024 and start her era of dominance over the sport that she has, since dominated in the year since. 600 kilos, 109.29% is the biggest world record break we've ever seen at Sheffield, and that likely will remain that way because that is almost 10% to break a world record by, is absolutely monstrous. And the entire podium that year actually consisted of 69 kilo lifters. Leah Bavois and Carola Gara rounded out the podium that year. And in 2025, the most recent installment, we saw Kjell Bakkelund take this strategy across to the men's side for the first time, in dropping down to the 66 kilo class. So coming in, his best total was 815 kilos that he'd done in the 74s, and that was done in early 2024 before Perk made his way to the IPF. So it was actually the IPF world record at the time, 815. The 66 kilo world record going into last year's Sheffield was actually 725, done by Kyoto Ushiyama, which in itself was already a bit of a jump from what it was, because it was actually 710.5 for a few years prior to that. But Kjell dropped down and added 45 kilos, 100 pounds to the world record, took it to 770, fell slightly short of the Crazy Golf 800, but still won by a landslide. 106.21% for the biggest world record break by anyone aside from Agata Sitko, the biggest world record break on the men's side we'd ever seen at Sheffield. And that made 3 straight years of at least one of the champions at Sheffield being a lifter who's not normally in that weight class, but someone who dropped down and did the hero cut. Now lifters, if you like my stat breakdowns and want to see exactly how you stack up against a global historical population, I have something for you. I've been working on a product called the PresserIndex that immortalizes your current strength standing in time and gives renewed purpose to your training by identifying specific data-driven milestones to work towards next. These reports are fully customized to you, and I'm giving out a very limited number for free in exchange for just honest feedback. So if you're interested, click the link in the description to submit your info. It's first come, first served. Now, before we look at this year's roster of Sheffield athletes, I wanted to show you the world records from before the inaugural Sheffield in 2023 to the current world records now for the men and the women, and the growth in the classes, because I actually think that hero cuts are a great thing for the sport, and they're one of my favorite features of Sheffield. I'm actually really going to miss it this year. I know this is a bit of a mixed opinion, or controversial opinion maybe, because I know some people, for whatever reason, are not huge fans of people dropping down a weight class. In fact, they actually quite dislike it. I'll touch on my arguments in a second, but first, yeah, these were the world records from pre-2023, each of the weight classes up until now, and you can see the relative growth on the right side. And the biggest growth of a weight class record from before Sheffield came into the sport to now was in the 66s, which was the weight class that Kjell dropped down to. And this ties into why I like this hero cut trend, because it incentivizes lifters to push the boundaries of the sport in certain weight classes that they probably otherwise would not have done. I mean, Kjell has been very open in saying that if it weren't for Sheffield, he never would have gone down to 66, right? He won a world title as well, but that wouldn't have been enough motivation for him to do it. Sheffield is what got him down there. And similar thing for the other female athletes I look at when I look at the next slide with the female table. But 770, who knows how many years we would have had to wait for a 66 lifter to push the record all the way to 770 if Kjell wouldn't have come down and done it. I mean, the 66s before Kjell were in the low 700s, right around 710 for about half a decade. Like literally, since like about 2019, they've been in the low 700s. So for Kjell to come and do it, just advance the sport forward by a pretty large chunk, and I think that's a good thing. And the reason some people probably don't like it is because, well, the argument I've heard, which doesn't make sense to me, is it's like they're running away from competition. Like when Kjell won Sheffield, a lot of people were saying all he did was he ran away from Perk, he dropped down a weight class and got weaker by losing kilos off his total, but he still somehow won, right? To me, that doesn't make sense, because that's not how weight classes work. If you step on the scale and you weigh in 66 kilos, you are as much of a 66 as any other lifter who has been a 66 before. That's how weight works. That's how numbers work. They're objective, right? The fact Kjell weighed in at 66 doesn't make him any less or more of a 66 than any other 66 kilo weighed powerlifter in history, right? He weighed 66 kilos. End of story. That's that. So what he did has to be judged against what any 66 had done, not against what a past version of himself had done, weighing 8 kilos heavier. Okay, let's look at the women's one, and you'll see a similar trend here. The two weight classes that we've had these hero cuts, so Evie Corrigan, who dropped from the 57s to the 52s, and Agata dropping from the 76s to the 69s, you can see there by quite a large chunk, those are the weight classes that have had the greatest record progression since pre-Sheffield's introduction to the sport to present day now. The 84 pluses actually comes close, but that's obviously entirely different. It's more to do with Sunita and Brittany just being a hell of a lot stronger than any other woman has ever been in history right now. But you can see there above 10% growth in his weight classes. And again, you can make the same argument. How long would it have taken for the 52s to get into the 480s? Or how long would it have taken for a 69 lifter to get into 628? I mean, Agata's an extreme case because she's the outlier of all outliers, right? But still, we probably would have had to wait quite a while, and this definitely progressed the sport forward beyond what would have happened otherwise with normal rates of progression. The other thing with this is it also drives up the competition, right? We all know the 4-minute mile effect, or in powerlifting terms, I like to call it the 900 kilo effect in the 93s, where one person does it and all of a sudden everyone else is doing it, right? So now you have Megan Lee Smith, who actually holds the 52 kilo record ahead of Evie, and is actually totaled as high as 490, weighing slightly above 52. So it looks like she's getting close to 500 kilos and smashing that barrier down. But would she have got there in the same time frame if Evie hadn't have, been the trailblazer that took it all the way up to the 480s previously? Maybe, maybe not. We won't know, but the effect of your competitors lifting you up is a very real thing. Okay, so let's look at the Sheffield rosters from this year for the men and the women and see if there's anyone who could potentially do this in the future, although I don't think there is. Or that it hasn't been announced, definitely. So Ivan Campeno Diaz is a 59 lifter, so there's no way close for him to drop to. That's an easy, never going to happen. Kjell Bakkelund is going as a 74. He's been very open about that. He's done with the 66s. So we're going to see Kjell back as a 74 lifter. Perk is someone who I actually think he could have, if he wanted to, he could have dropped down to 66 with Kjell. He actually weighed in significantly lighter at 2024 Worlds, where he went head-to-head against Kjell. He literally weighed in 72 kilos something, right? So he was actually a smaller human being than Kjell was, and Kjell was the one that cut down to 66. Obviously, Perk would have no real reason to, given he's so dominant at 74 and he's trying to push up towards 83s more than go down to 66s. But yeah, I don't think Perk, I think he's looking more to go the other way up to 83s than he's looking to go down to the 66s. Joe Borenstein, similar, he actually was a 74 before, and he moved up to the 83s as he crossed over to Powerlifting America from the USAPL. He is not going to go back down to 74. He definitely has to cut weight to make 83. He's probably one of the bigger 83s in terms of frame already. And again, similar to Perk, if anything, he's looking to go in the other direction up to 93s. Durance Kangamu has been an 83 for years and years and years, since the dark ages of powerlifting, like pre-2019, so he's not going anywhere. Emil Krastev as well has been a 93 for ages and has shown no signs of coming down to 83. Gustav Hedlund, same thing as Emil Krastev, hasn't shown any signs of moving down. If anything, him and Emil would, I guess, move up versus move down, especially Gustav. I feel like Gustav is slightly taller than some of the other 93s out there. Russ is someone who just moved up to the 93s. You might think, well, maybe he's going to go back down to 83s at some point. I don't think that's happening. I think it's pretty clear. He literally gave away his World Games invite because of not wanting to go back down to 83 again. And that's an invite that previously he fought very hard for and was very proud of getting. So the fact he threw that away kind of means I don't expect him to be an 83 ever again, which I think is fine. He had about the best exit that you can have to an 83 kilo career when he got his vengeance at Sheffield this year. Anthony McNaughton, 105. There would be no point of him going down to 93s, nor could he, I don't think anyway. He's a huge 105. I think he walks around closer to 110. And he's only a few kilos below the 120 world record, so he's not doing a cut. Keenan Lee is an interesting one. Out of this roster of athletes, he's probably the closest to potentially being able to do this if he really, really wanted to. Because at some point, I think it was in 2024, he actually competed. This was before it came to Powerlifting America, I believe. This was in USAPL. He totaled 940 and he weighed in at about 98 kilos. So he was at that point closer to being a 93 than a 105 when he totaled 940, which at the time, 940 was actually the 105 IPF world record. So he's someone who, if he really pushed and wanted to, and I mean, I don't know how much he had to water cut to get even to that 98, but if he was relatively, just walk around weight at that, a cut down to 93s at that point in time wouldn't have been inconceivable, and he was totaling 940, which back then was way above where the 93s were. Now, 93s are getting closer to that number, but still. But yeah, based on his training, he's not doing it for this Sheffield, or if he is, that would be absolutely ridiculous because he's been hitting some huge lifts in the gym, 370 squat, 380 deadlift. So yeah, Keenan's definitely going in as a 105, or maybe even 120, I don't know. Emil Norling is the forgotten Sheffield athlete. No one seems to have been talking about Emil Norling. Everyone goes on about Anthony McNaughton, rightfully so, and people talk about Keenan Lee. You can't sleep on Keenan Lee, but no one's talking about Emil Norling. It's not just Anthony v. Keenan, it's Anthony v. Keenan v. Emil in the 105s. Although, and I got to say, rightfully so, Emil is, far from the favorite in that matchup, because 935 is the best total he hit, which is what qualified him to Sheffield. But that's, a big PB total for him, and that's still a long ways off mid 900s, even high 900s, where we expect Anthony and Keenan to be potentially even at the 1,000 mark. But again, Emil Norling has been a 105 for a very long time, and I don't see any indications of him dropping down. And the final athlete, Etienne Elcher, is a 120, and he's a pretty big 120, so he's definitely not making a 15 kilo cut either. But I think there's a pretty good chance of breaking the world record, which you saw previously has stood since way before Sheffield 2016, actually. Also, side note, how sick is that Lebanese singlet? One of the best singlets. That looks insane. On to the women's roster. Heather Connor, again, is a 47. Same with Tiff. They're not going anywhere. I actually think Tiff, if anything, is going to move up to the 52s after this Sheffield, which will be interesting. Evie Corrigan, interestingly, she, of course, was the one that pioneered this trend back in 2023, winning the inaugural Sheffield. She qualified as a 52, but she's actually moving back up to the 57s, I believe, anyway. I haven't really been able to tell from a recent training what body weight she's at, but I'm pretty sure she said that World Games was her last 52 outing, unless she's trying to do one more at Sheffield. But I'm pretty sure she's up back as a 57. And I mean, since she's dropped to 52 from 57 initially, she's actually PB'd her total, period. So, you know, what happens when she goes back up to 57? Probably going to expect to see a pretty big jump, which will be interesting. Sarah Nolly is someone who actually pretty much did this already, except she didn't do it at Sheffield. She was a 63 lifter, and then she cut down to the 57s, and boy, did it work out for her last year. She ended up being the world champion, breaking the world record. I think she got a silver at World Games as well, so she had a pretty damn good year. So she is someone who's done this, but sort of pre-Sheffield, not at Sheffield. But even that, you could say, has been influenced by the previous year's culture we've seen at Sheffield that made athletes like Sarah Nolly willing to do it in her own weight class. I mean, if Sarah Nolly wouldn't have seen 3 previous Sheffield champions cutting down, would she have convinced herself to cut down from 63s and push the 57 record and win a world title? Maybe, maybe not. But yet again, that's another positive impact of this trend. Alba Borstrom, actually, before I move on from Sarah Nolly, she has talked about moving down even another weight class further to the 52s, because apparently she walks around pretty light as a 57 now. Now that she's made the cut from 63 to 57, she walks around that weight without even having to do a water cut. And she's spoken about maybe even going down to the 52s, which would be crazy, dropping down 2 weight classes and still being amongst the best in the world in all 3 of them. So that'll be cool to see. Although for this Sheffield, I don't anticipate she's doing that unless she's keeping it secret, which would be crazy. Alba Borstrom is 63. Not sure how much weight she cuts, but I don't think she's really going to go down to 57. Chiara Bernardi, same thing, is a 63 and has been one for a while, I believe. Meg Scanlon is someone who's looking to go the other way. She's a 63. She actually was a 57 back in the day. Now a 63, has been for a while. And she's looking to move up to the 69s potentially, since Agata might not be competing, more on Agata in a second. But Agata might not be competing for most of the year, hopefully not, but maybe. In which case, the 69s are pretty much wide open, and Meg looks right up there as someone who could take that number 1 spot in Agata's absence. So we'll see what happens there, but she's definitely not going back down to a 57. Carlina Tongatea is a 76, has been for ages, and I don't see her doing a cut either. Amanda Lawrence has been 84 and the strongest 84 forever. No reason for her to cut. And Brittany Schlater is obviously an 84 plus and significantly an 84 plus, same as Sundamulu, so they're not going down to 84s anytime soon. So really, Sarah Nolly seems to be the most likely out of all these women, but those are the 11 known athletes on the women's side going to Sheffield. We actually still don't know who the final lifter is, because it should be Agata Sitko. Of course, she earned her spot by winning Worlds in the 69 kilo class, and we would have expected her to be going in as a 76, despite winning Worlds weighing a tad over 63, which is crazy. But yeah, I think she is now. She's gone back up to 76s, I believe, anyway, in training, looking to take the world record that she unofficially has already smashed anyway. That's what we expected from her. Unfortunately, it's looking like she won't be there. We still don't know it. It's not been officially announced Agata's not competing, so there's still a glimmer of hope, is what that tells me. And they're still trying to sort out behind the scenes. I'm not really privy to any information that you guys aren't, so I can't speak to more on that. But the fact that they haven't announced it gives me hope that maybe, just maybe, we'll see Agata back trying to win her 3rd straight Sheffield. But in Agata's absence, and again, this hasn't been officially announced, so I'm just going off the only source of info that I can find on this, which is on Good Lift, the nominations for Sheffield. And Bobby Butters and Ziana Azariah, both British lifters. Bobby Butters in the 57s, Ziana in the 84s. They're both listed as reserves for Sheffield. So I'm guessing that if whatever they're trying to sort out between whoever it is in the IPF or the Polish Fed and Agata behind the scenes, if that doesn't work out, then Bobby or Ziana is going to be the one to step in. It is a bit weird, though, that Sheffield hasn't announced any reserves or anything, because I know in the previous years they did announce reserves, and it was a big talking point, but they seem to have kept that a bit quieter this year. But regardless, for the purpose of this video, Bobby Butters is a 57, and Ziana Azariah is an 84. Both of them, I don't think are going... I mean, Bobby Butters is already pretty damn lean and jacked for a 57, and Ziana is an 84. Yeah, I didn't see her going 76s either. But there you go. Those are the rosters for the men and the women. Now, the current world records for the men. I showed this before, but I'll show it again here because I think what drives this trend, and probably the reason why we're not seeing it for this year, is because the driver for the trend is certain weight classes that are lagging behind the rest. Some people say weaker weight classes, which I think is a bit harsh, but, you know, weaker weight class world records. Previously, the 66ers were pretty noticeably lagging behind a bit. Like I said, they'd been in the low 700s, it's like right around 710, for a good like 5 years before Kjell came in and bumped it up to 770. And if you look at that trend, like, you know, Perk being in the 840s, and now we're expecting to be way higher, but Perk being in the 840s, some 140 kilos above where the 66ers were at the time, was kind of crazy that was just a one weight class gap. So Kjell came in and plugged that hole off the 66s, bumped up to 770, and that is definitely not a weak world record anymore. But as this has happened, and as the Sheffields have sort of, you know, rolled around each year, each weight class is just getting more and more stacked, and the record gets more and more pushed. And there's less of these weight classes that remain that have these more vulnerable world records that people can move down and exploit. So I guess the only one really left at this point was the 105s and 120s before Anthony put 35 kilos on the record at Worlds, because he was down at 940.5 before that. And, you know, the 93 is starting to catch up to that now, right around 920. But Anthony's knocked that far enough out that it's no longer a weaker world record. The 120s, though, being at 978.5 is probably the last of these more vulnerable or weaker records left, because that stood since 2016, Dennis Cornelius back in the day. To be fair, the only reason that record's so low is because Rondell has been screwed out of his career for so long, or else he would have smashed that years ago. But that's probably the last one left. And the thing is, it's kind of hard, or it would be hard for 120 plus lifters to cut down to the 120s, purely because most of the 120 plus lifters are like significantly on the plus side, right? We're talking like 150, 160, 170, 180 kilos of body weight. There's not a lot that are walking around close-ish to 120. Although, interestingly, Timur Samkaradze is someone who recently did do a cut down, pretty significant one actually. He lost like almost 30 kilos of body weight, except he still stayed in the same weight class. So he went from weighing roughly 160 to roughly 130. Still 10 kilos above the 120s, but his total did dip by a good 100 kilos though. Although he's still right around 990. I think he won World Games with 990. So if he's able to, you know, do the rest of that cut down to 120 and keep that strength, he could potentially be pushing that world record, although I doubt that world record lasts long enough for him to do that at Sheffield the next Sheffield after this one, because obviously you've got Etienne and then Rondell coming back, looking to smash that out of the park. And then for the women, similar thing, since the 52s and 69, I mean the 69s you saw in the previous table were definitely a weaker world record, purely because you could see the weight class below was higher. The 63s, because it was in a more established weight class that had been around literally the whole time since raw powerlifting was introduced in the IPF, whereas the 69s were only brought in a couple of years ago, right? Or at the time of Sheffield, Agata winning her first Sheffield, it was a couple of years ago. It might look from this that the 76s is a weaker world record because the 69s is greater, but that is a bit skewed by the outlier that is Agata, because aside from Agata, the biggest 69 total is like 580 something, right? And Agata herself has totaled 635 as a 76, just not officially internationally. So yeah, Agata really could hold a bunch of records on there, which is wild, and it's why we need to see her back. God damn it! But yeah, there's no real room for people to move down and just quickly add huge kilos that you can plainly see from this list anyway. And that is why I think we're not seeing this trend this year, and that is why I think that's a bit of a shame. I mean, it's obviously no one's fault, but I always look forward to those moments, seeing lifters move down. Gives us fresh matchups as well. You know, that's another thing that I haven't talked about yet, but I'll quickly mention here at the end is when Kjell dropped down. Well, first when actually I'll do all of them. Evie dropped down in 2023, went head to head against Noemi Alibert, the reigning world champion world record holder, and beat her. How cool is that? That's a matchup we hadn't seen or expected at that point. Agata, when she dropped down and won Sheffield in 2024, went head to head against Leah Bavois, the reigning world champion world record holder, and Carola Garro, who was the 63 kilo world record holder and world champ, I believe. So that was an insane three-way battle. And then Kjell, when he dropped down, and this is very overlooked because Kjell smashed the world record by so much, he didn't do it uncontested. In fact, he did it against Kasim Sand, who was the reigning world champion in 66s, as well as a previous world record holder for a long time, and Penna, who's one of the biggest names in the division. So Kjell did it against those guys. So that's another thing that the hero cut gives us is matchups they otherwise would not have seen. And matchups and head-to-head battles is one of the best parts of the sport of powerlifting. You guys know that. I'm a big fan of those. But there you go. That is the trend of the winning hero cuts at Sheffield we've seen so far, which unfortunately looks like it's coming to an end and we're not going to see this year. But let me know if you think any lifters potentially in the near future could pull this off.